All right, we're getting ready to go live soon, guys.
So what is going on in Georgia? Y'all been open much longer than us. Have you seen terrible spikes in your numbers?
For us, not necessarily. There are some spikes happening. Of course, you know, in Albany, man, that we was one of the hotbeds. So for me, we actually seen a decline in the numbers. But I'm gonna be honest, this is me and you talking. I don't trust the data.
We streaming live right now, guys.
Good morning. Okay.
All right, we're getting ready to get started. I want to welcome everybody here to the panel discussion. There you go. You got it, Steph. Okay, thank you. So first of all, I want to thank you guys as some of our affordable housing leaders in our nation. I want to welcome you guys to the panel discussion. We titled this discussion, The Balcony and the Dance Floor. And the whole concept around that is that we know as leaders and as whether it's a CEO of a housing authority, a leader of a major department, or leaders in the industry related to policy, as some of us are, and along with Steph being here from FADA, was very important. But the balcony is one place and the dance floor is another. You know, as leaders, sometimes you have to be on the balcony where you're looking down overview of everything that's happening. But in our industry, particularly today's time, we have to get to the dance floor where we can really see what's going on. On the balcony, you have that overview point, but on the dance floor, you can really touch people and see them from side to side, smell the various smells that's in the air, and really kind of touch the clients and people that we're serving. So that's why we have this title. In today's conversation, we're talking about COVID-19. We're talking about the unrest, the civil unrest that's going on in our country, and really how affordable housing will play that role. Because I want to hear from you guys, and I want to hear from you related to not only how you feel as men in this country today, but also as housing leaders, and how some of the things and policies that you helped create and develop for your organizations or for organizations across the nation has impacted so far. So with that said, I'll briefly introduce myself and then we can allow us to get started. So again, welcome. We had another member that wasn't able to arrive with us today. So unforeseen circumstances came up and she had to bow out. But I'm David Northern. I'm the CEO of the Champaign County Housing Authority. Been in the industry over 25, 26 years. You can probably tell by all the gray. Tried to match my jacket with my face, I guess. But also, I'm the Senior Vice President of the Public Housing Authority Directors Association. And that association, it's a policy leader in our industry. It helps the policy direction and guide policy in Washington for close to 2,000 housing authorities. They've been in business doing that for quite some time, and I'm just excited to be a part of that and a leader in the housing industry overall. And so with that being said, let's get down to our first panelist, Charles, a good friend of mine. We go way back from our Illinois days. So how you doing, sir?
Good morning, everyone, and afternoon to some. My name is Charles Hillman, as David indicated, and I, first of all, want to say hello to my other panelists. It's a pleasure to join you brothers today, and I want to thank David Northern for his leadership and the Champaign Housing Authority for their work in this area and this very important topic. Again, my name is Charles Hillman, and I have the pleasure of serving as President and CEO of the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority, where we serve over 40,000 residents in Franklin County. We are on track to invest over $250 million in the development of mixed income communities, as well as the revitalization of our current portfolio. We are in the final phase of a $250 million choice implementation grant to revitalize our neighborhoods. And then this pandemic hits, civil unrest has converged to produce the most unsettling time we've seen in 2 generations, with both protesters and the virus raging. You know, as leaders, David, you well know, we must look at ourselves and ask, what can we do? So at the offset of this pandemic, we determined as an organization that what we could do. And the 3 most important things that we focused on was keeping those who were housed, support those in transition looking for housing to find housing, and most importantly, keeping our employees and our residents safe. The overarching fact is, the reality is that housing authorities serve very low income individuals and people with special needs. Residents who are Black have been disproportionately loss of jobs, illness, and institutional racism. Our residents feel particularly vulnerable right now, you all. At CMHA, we've continued to use our collective voices. I, as CEO, the same in social media platforms and events like this to help reconfirm our commitment. You know, while some of us want to go back to the normal, I don't. I say that we all must use our positions to make about change that we've talked about for generations. I am committed to the notion and driven that we must make a change. And this is where we stand at the Housing Authority.
Thank you. That's deep. I know that you've had to deal a lot with the COVID-19. Could you just give us, a brief overview of some of the things that you have to handle or deal with related to that?
Well, I guess the biggest thing was the fact that we had never been through something like this before and didn't know exactly what to do. We established 3 priorities, as I mentioned before. And I think the most important thing that we were able to achieve was the development of a service center. We were an essential to our community and did not have the capacity not to deliver service. And so we established a service call center, which we've received over 15,000 calls, about 250 clients a day are using this system. We have converted to a complete telework model as an organization where 100% of our staff are delivering services from a remote location. And I think the biggest thing is recognizing the importance of improving our technology to make sure we provide our residents with a safe option to receive service. And while all that's going on, while we're trying to work, we're trying to deal with riots in the streets and and I'm mad. But, that's how I'm dealing with it.
Yeah. Well, I hear you. And as we said before, we know that the civil unrest is something that's really unfortunate, period. However, when it's happening during this time where we're dealing with a mass pandemic, we already deal with disinvestment in affordable housing throughout our country. But it just makes it even worse. As an African-American male that grew up in a pretty tough area in Northwest Indiana, Gary, Indiana, with the murder capital for a number of years, I saw firsthand what systemic racism does to people in cities, and how urban sprawl really affects urban power centers, where major job centers are, and people move out to the suburb area and travel in and spend all the money outside. Therefore, the tax bases really suffer. So I totally get that and I understand that. And I have young kids. I have teenagers. I have a son that just started driving. My daughter's been driving, and it's scary, to have that conversation. So I had to reiterate the importance of following guidelines, which they should have rights to that's respected by everybody, period. So I appreciate your comments, and I've always appreciated your leadership and our friendship and what you provide to the housing industry. So next, let's go to Seth Emery from FADA, who's a good friend of mine, and I had a good opportunity to work with Seth at FADA when I was the vice president for housing for FADA. Now I'm the senior vice president. I still get a chance to work with him, but not as much hands-on. So I'm happy to see him today.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Glad to be here to contribute to the conversation and to really, learn from you 3 as leaders, as on the ground responders, so to speak. So FADA, as hopefully, I know you 3 know, but hopefully everyone tuning in knows. And for those who don't, we're a national, just like David said, we're a national organization of the executive directors of housing authorities all across the country. We have members that are the largest PHAs, the smallest PHAs. I was just on a call with a member earlier this week, trying to help her work through some issues, and she's got under 70 units of public housing, no vouchers, down in Mississippi. So very small to like I said, the largest PHAs in the country are members of ours, MTW, non-MTW, suburban, rural. They span the whole spectrum. And so what we're interested in right now during this time of crisis is first, our first thought was, what can we do to help in Washington, D.C. through influencing the policy process? What can we do to help support the PHAs who are really, essential service providers in communities all across the country? Housing is essential, particularly when you're asking people to shelter in place. Housing becomes really, really much more of a focal point to provide other support services. So what can we do then? And then now we're thinking about not only how can we support PHAs through that, but also how can the industry be positioned to support the country as we think about a recovery process. We have unprecedented numbers of unemployment and a really uncertain economic future, in addition to all the issues that we're talking about today, which is how do we ensure that equal justice and civil rights are extended to all portions of our population. And when it comes to housing, I know we'll get into this later, but it's, you know, PHAs aren't immune from the issues and from the biases and the discrimination that we see in all kinds of industries. And so, you know, you can look at the Department of Justice website, HUD's website, and find instances of really disheartening and widespread discrimination that happens, if it be in public housing, segregation. And I'm not talking about, you know, past generations. I'm talking about, you know, now during my lifetime. I've worked on projects before I came to FADA where we were kind of, as a consultant, where we were trying to right a ship of a PHA that had been found to have systemic fair housing violations. And so transitioning those agencies to be better community partners is something that has to happen. And your agencies are really positioned as PHAs. Your agencies are positioned to hear the needs and to fill the needs of people, the most needy, the lowest income folks in your communities, but also help them to understand that their housing is a platform to increase their economic opportunity, increase their awareness, increase their ability to participate in society. And so I'm really excited to participate. But like I said, also to learn from what's going on in your communities. So thanks, David, for having me.
Thanks a lot. I know that, you know, FADA, you know, along with other housing organizations, you know, that most of us are a part of or been a part of, played a big role in some of the waivers and other policy decisions that came down as a result of COVID-19. Just talk about a couple of those that you worked on or.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good point. So, you know, back in March, seems like a year ago. So in March, the CARES Act was passed, which included funding, supplemental funding for both the voucher program for public housing, but also the, you know, other affordable housing programs, including PBRA. And so it also included really broad waiver authority. So the secretary has issued waivers for the public housing and voucher programs to enable PHAs to really respond more effectively to their local crises, to their local situation. And so we've been, you know, working with the department, having weekly and now bi-weekly calls about the needs of the industry when it comes to issues as small as, I shouldn't say small, but as specific as recertification, as specific as how documents are signed, as specific as how the different things that PHAs can do with the money that they've been given. So that came with, I'll give one example to not hog up the call, but when the HUD initially provided money to PHAs for both vouchers and public housing, HUD said that the funds could be used as of for expenses that occurred on or after May 1. And we know that you've been dealing as an agency with COVID-related issues since maybe as early as February, if not earlier, to plan and respond to the crisis in your community. And so through a lot of work, through a lot of conversations, through a lot of advocacy, we got HUD to shift that date to the date of enactment of the CARES Act, which was March 27th. And that's not where we want it to be. We think it needs to go back even further than that to ensure that PHAs are able to cover any costs that they had to respond to the COVID crisis. But we were able to move the date back significantly, and that's a real victory for PHAs and for residents, because every dollar really that PHAs have that they're not able to stretch and use as flexibly as possible is a dollar that takes away from being able to provide housing and services to families. And so that's always at the core of what we're thinking, and the work that we do is, what is it that PHAs need in terms of money, in terms of regulatory relief, to enable them to better serve the households in their communities?
I appreciate that. You know, we started focusing and dealing with COVID very early, the first part of March. I even was on an early quarantine as a result of one of my staff members becoming ill. You know, I was fortunate to overcome it and had a number of symptoms, but end up not having it. So I'm still here and I can talk about it. But we started working and setting down items and making plans, for the benefit of our clients and our staff members. And those are costs, right? So, you guys
Right.
fight for that, really meant a lot for us. So I totally appreciate that. Also, as Charles, and you mentioned this a little earlier, as we look at a new norm, as we talk about how we're doing virtual briefings and how we're trying to use less paper already. We're MTW, so we have that flexibility. And so, it was right in line what we wanted to do. So first thing I did is talk to staff and said, hey, how can we, one, take this bad situation and further our efforts in terms of cost savings and being more flexible and seeing what we can do. So, I think this is an opportunity that all housing authorities should take a look, but I want HUD and all our elected officials to pay attention as we can continue to operate at this type of level, giving us our local flexibilities. For example, we created a special voucher to work with homeless shelters, to get people out those homeless shelters, to get them in housing. We called it the temporary COVID-19, stay in housing voucher preference, right? So you had to be in a homeless shelter for 14 days. So it comes with case management. We give them a voucher. We provided 50 vouchers, whether it was project-based vouchers, tenant-based vouchers, or whatever, to receive referrals, and they have to continually manage and work with those individuals. We eliminated the screening process. We wanted to get people in housing, but we wanted to not bring people right off the street and put them in housing, but we wanted to have people that was already being worked on, so we can open up those shelters for other people. That flexibility was something that we already had, and we really didn't need a special law for because of our MTW status. But it's good that other housing authorities are able to make those flexible local decisions to help their people. So that's something that, I know our industry groups are continually hammer HUD and our elected officials in Washington that giving us this flexibility, increasing the number of MTW agents is nothing but very helpful for our organizations.
Right.
And so, Mr. Miles.
Yes, sir.
So I met this gentleman a long time ago, and we both worked in Philadelphia. I actually had the opportunity to interview him. So he's a young man I'm so proud of, and I watch you and you do such great work. So I'm glad you was able to be a part of this panel, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Definitely, man. I thank you, David, for the forward thinking and even begin to facilitate such a discussion, man. And it's been a pleasure knowing you, man. So definitely appreciate you. It's an honor to be among such prestigious gentlemen. I love to see young Black men doing great things and impactful things in their particular community, man. So definitely thank you very much for having me. Again, my name is William Miles, born and raised in Meridian, Mississippi. And that's where I began my career in public housing. And then I roughly, as David mentioned earlier, I had a short stint at the Philadelphia Housing Authority, where I felt like that was the real grooming, the real school, the real lesson began. And I'm so grateful for my opportunity there at the Philadelphia Housing Authority. And then later, roughly about 2 years ago, this month, I want to say, I migrated back down south to Albany, Georgia. I roughly worked in public housing right at maybe 15 or so years, but I would be remiss if I did not say that I was born and raised in public housing. So I lived in public housing roughly about maybe 19 to 20 years. So I lived in public housing longer than I've worked in public housing. And so that's what I kind of carry with me as a mantle that keeps me grounded and keeps a different perspective for me, man, because I'm just the type of leader that I believe from creating solutions from the bottom up as opposed to from the bottom down, because a lot of times we miss it. We have a lot of great ideas, man, and it looks very, very nice, but it becomes ineffective because the people that, we're targeting and we're looking to impact doesn't benefit from it. And so for me coming here to Albany, being able to establish some type of footprint, man, and letting people know that, number one, for me, housing is just the platform. Housing stabilizes families, but it's a platform because we believe in targeting these residents, man, holistically. Because I remember living in public housing, man, and I felt like I didn't have a voice. I didn't have an opportunity to express some of the ways that I was feeling, some of the needs that we had in public housing. And, you know, I remember what that felt like. So keeping that perspective, man, is what kind of allowing me to move and maneuver and to navigate in the manner in which I do, and which especially when this pandemic hit, man, it was so new and it was so massive and so abrupt. So it literally caught a lot of people off guard. It literally did. And I want to say it caught entities, agencies, cities, the state, of course, the federal government. And then when you begin to look upward for that leadership, man, you start looking nationally, start looking at your state officials, and then they're looking like, okay, we're just as lost as you are. So what it does, it pushes the leaders to lead. You know, it makes people do what they've been equipped to do. And so fortunately, you know, through my experiences, man, we were able to put together a COVID-19 task force internally. We began to meet and we began to partner personally with the local CDC, Department of Health, all of those entities that we know we was going to need, that was going to be instrumental in our strategy. Man, we called them up. We did what we needed to do to get the job done, man. And we successfully began to set up one of our sites as a testing site. Before it was popular, before everybody was able to make that happen, that was one of the things that we did. We set up one of our sites as a testing site. We had an RN that volunteered to say, hey, your residence means enough to me to where I go and volunteer my time. If we can get the testing kits, I would administer the test. And so she did. And so we partnered with the Department of Public Health. They provided those testing kits. We were able to test almost maybe 100 to 200 residents within our facility, because we have a senior tower. And that's what really, I guess, set off a sense of alert for me, because you have all of these individuals that are susceptible to this particular virus all in one location. And communication was key. But how do you go begin to communicate with residents when you're normally accustomed to this face-to-face, when you're accustomed to going door to door? What do you do now? So, man, we had to move quickly, expeditiously, and say, you know what? Technology got to become our new best friend. And so we began to implement from Zoom. We've just established a new alert app to where we can allow residents to kind of sign up and download this particular app, and we can send out specific alerts to residents located in a certain area. So whether it's an active shooter, whether there's a spike in COVID in your area, whether there's a hurricane, whatever the case may be, we can send an alert to that app and it will alert them. So it's not a thing that where they have to be checking the app for pertinent information, but we would trigger the actual alert, and so it would notify the residents. So, you know, we began to act extremely swift and quickly. We began to get PPEs for our residents, not for our residents, but for our maintenance staff and our frontline staff. And we began to make personal calls on our seniors and track their data, because I needed to know who needed to be tested, who have not been tested. If you have been tested, you know, where are you? Are there any needed resources that you may need? Because we asked everybody to quarantine for 14 days because we didn't know who had it, who did not, especially with us being a hotbed. And we had a lot of different events that caused the small city of Albany, Georgia, to just become overwhelmed with it, man. But I didn't want to stand on the sideline, man, and ask what somebody can do for me. I wanted to jump in there, man, and see what I can do for them. And so, right, man, we just made it happen, man. I'm so proud of my staff and residents, man, for collaborating with us. We had a lot of community partnering agencies that allowed us to bring a mobile grocery store, brought all types of resources to our residents, man. So it made the self-quarantine process a lot easier, man. So, you know, those are just some of the things we began to do here in Albany, man, while all of that was at its peak.
I appreciate that. You know, I watched some of the things you've done, and, you know, throughout the nation. And that's one of the things this platform helps to give other houses or community members that don't really understand what we do. A lot of times, you know, my background say HACC, but really I look at our organization as an affordable housing developer and manager. That's what we really are.
Absolutely.
We want to partner with those social service providers to provide the wraparound services to our clients. Let us focus on what we need to focus on. But we all know that
Absolutely.
more than brick and mortar to change people's lives. And that's why as housers, especially taking this special opportunity now, uh, with the civil unrest, we can look at some of our policies that we have and see how we can dismantle systemic racism. Whether it's not allowing individuals to receive housing because they have a criminal record. Well, why did they get it? I know I heard in Georgia there was a number of arrests made by officers who was trumping up charges on people for years. So
Absolutely.
I'm not saying we don't trust. I'm also on the Sheriff's Merit Commission. I still have a badge as a result of that. So I'm not saying don't trust, law enforcement. What I'm saying is that people sometimes take things in their own hands. And so we have to look at that. Here in Champaign, I know I didn't talk a lot about our agency, but we are a move to work agency in Illinois, one of two, other than Chicago, that Charles worked at for a number of years. And having that flexibility, we currently working on close to over $100 million of development, affordable housing development. We have a number of projects in our county, but we have 5 projects that we're working on outside because we know that it's a steady supply of money that's needed to maintain our properties along with our programs. And we can't count on the federal government for every dollar. So we have to make money and have to have a different mindset. And that's what, people like yourself are doing. And that's the blessings that we have as leaders, especially having the flexibility of MTW. You can do a little more things. So, our programs, we all RAD, so we have no public housing. So when we say we're a housing authority, that mindset goes one way. Every time I say housing, people say Cabrini Green. That's no,
That's okay to think Cabrini Green.
Yeah, it's okay. But they think the worst parts of it. In Philly, we had Blumberg. What was it?
Blumberg. Yep, Blumberg.
I remember being terrified. I was tough, and so I went up there and they told me I can't come to the top floor. And I said,
absolutely.
Well, and they showed me something. I'm like, that's okay.
It's real in those streets, David.
But I just think this is just an excellent opportunity for us as leaders in the housing industry to reconfirm our commitment to the work. We had an affordable housing crisis in our local and in our nation before this pandemic hit. I just think this just highlights the importance of, as all you gentlemen have said, housing is the platform for all things. And so this is our requirement, our opportunity, and our time to reconfirm and to educate elected officials in our communities. We are economic drivers of communities. We provide stabilization, we provide housing, we provide partnerships and services to ensure that our residents have access to needed services. And so we must capitalize on this. We must find funding available. I have to say, gentlemen, I was actually pleased with HUD's response to this. I think that they stepped up quickly. I think that they provided a great deal of support to us. I mean, the waivers, while always more can be done, were certainly helpful to us as an organization. But I think we have to talk about the increase in this volume of affordable housing and not just maintaining the units that we have, but we've got to develop more affordable housing. Here in Columbus alone, we went from a 3% unemployment rate to a 13% unemployment rate, which is unconscionable. And so now we had a 50,000 unit shortage of affordable housing, and no one's calculated the new demand now, but I mean, it's got to be exponential. And so while we're investing $250 million this year, which is unprecedented, that's a fraction of what we need to do. I mean, these numbers that we talk about, you look at the largest, I mean, we're 14th largest in the nation, and we're only talking about investing $250 million when the needs are probably $1 billion better. And so we've got to figure out, and I challenge each and every one of us to figure out ways to leverage our funding, to leverage our influence, to continue our efforts for affordable housing. And I think you folk at FADA who are doing this policy work, I commend you, I thank you. It's going to be very important that we no longer let affordable housing be something that's an afterthought. David, as you mentioned, listen, we don't have any public housing, but we have housing that low-income people need. And so we need to continue to develop that. I think that, we need policies that help demand or insist that we provide these resources in an appropriate way.
You hit it on the head. I want to go to Seth for a minute. I know you guys do a lot of work. You've been in the industry for a number of years. Can you just talk about what you see as some changes that may occur? One of the troubling spots I have right now as a housing leader, not just focusing on my staff because it's challenging for them, it's challenging for us, it's challenging me. Feel motivated. Everybody deal with their own issues their own way, especially with the civil unrest. But what do you see as the future in terms of policy change? Not just temporary waivers, but real policy change.
Right.
Go to what's happening.
Yeah, honestly, I think one of the most important things that can come out of this is what you talked about, what you guys have all been talking about, which are your efforts during this crisis. And so what we have now is a situation where PHAs have the thousands of PHAs who aren't MTW, right? They, for the first time, have really broad waiver authority that MTW agencies do enjoy, which MTW agencies have proven to be able to transform into the creation of more units, more and innovative programs, be it shallow subsidies, be it working with homeless populations, new ways to develop housing. And so what agencies need to be able to do now to drive this forward is exactly what you're talking about, which are all the innovative programs that you instituted during this time of crisis to really serve your community. There was talked about the Alert app in the mobile grocery store. You're talking about the investments that you're making. What we need to be able to do is have the stories that show that when PHAs have the authority to implement programs locally, to have the local flexibility that they need to do that, they can achieve great things. Like you talked about, you are drivers of economic activity in your communities. One of the things that we're working on very strongly is to get a infrastructure bill to provide PHAs with billions of dollars in money to address issues in capital needs in public housing. So that's one thing, because every dollar that the PHA gets is multiplied in that local community with jobs, with economic activity. So that's really important. One of the things that so that's really what we're focused on, is not in a couple of months, but in the years to come, how this moment is a impetus for a lot of transformation in the industry, and how agencies realize, because the other thing is that not every PHA, not every leader understands the influence that they have. And so you guys just talked about influence. And it just so happens that the three of you are represented in Congress by really influential people. So David, your senator, one of your senators, Senator Durbin, is a senior leader in the Senate. He sits on the Appropriations Committee. And then on the authorizing side, Senator Brown from Ohio, he's the ranking member of the Banking Committee, which has authority over all issues housing. And then Senator Perdue out of Georgia, he's the chair of the Housing Subcommittee of the Banking Committee. So you three have, you're situated in places where your elected officials have power. Now, how they use that power is determined by the influence and by the noise that's made at the local level. I think that's one of the things that we're seeing now, is that when people at the local level make noise, and they make more noise, it's heard. And it might take a while. It might take, many iterations of efforts and things of that nature. But the power at the local level to influence policy at the federal level cannot be underestimated. And that's why I talked earlier about learning and listening to you guys, because when I hear about what you're doing, we can surely, elevate those stories, but we can't elevate things that aren't happening. And so continuing to be innovative at the local level is going to drive national policy. And so what we do want to see is affordable housing being positioned as the preferred method as one of the preferred methods of driving local economic activity, because it does it successfully. And PHAs, as your mission to help low-income folks, very low-income, extremely low-income folks, those are the people who really most need the housing, who are severely cost burdened. We know all that information, but those are also the folks who your services and your service coordination are really going to impact to the greatest extent. And so that's the core of what I'm saying, is continue to be innovative so that we can spread that innovation all across the country.
Right. But I think that the one thing that we have to talk about I just want to spend a few minutes on it, is the civil unrest and the blatant racism that we have to struggle with on top of the needs of providing housing. And that's one of the things that I think we have to say. We Black folk, and we Black folk in trouble, and we've been in trouble for a long time, and we got to say that. We got to be okay setting policies that address Black people. Absolutely. And I think until we're able to just really feel comfortable saying that, because I'm struggling with it, guys. You know, I've been taught to get along, right? But we can't, getting along ain't got us nothing. We having the same arguments we've been having. And we got to address the fact that the majority of people we serve look like us. The majority of the people we serve are struggling. And so we've got to have policies that no longer, and you, David, you mentioned it. I mean, how the fact that you've gone to jail, you can't never have a place to live?
Well, I mean, you can't go back and reunite with your family.
Right. I mean, it's ludicrous. Right. Why are we engaging in those types of divisive behaviors? We have policies that we enact in our own organizations that are driven, you know, to further increase our disparity. We've got to have policies that are more inclusive, that it's directly talk about the disparity and help to alleviate that. And those are some of the things that I think that we as Black folk got to come together and talk about. But I want to say this, we didn't cause racism, and we ain't gonna be the ones to fix racism. And we got to hold people accountable who did this and who have been doing this to us for generations.
You so right about that. When you talked about even a point about the, you know, I'm pissed off.
Right, and you're supposed to be. And if you ain't, I'm worried.
You know, it's like no matter how, I was explaining this to my son, no matter how hard I work, no matter how well I can lead, if any mistake, anytime I jaywalk,
you better not make one.
You know, bet not. I mean, it's to the point that, like, you know, we brought Youth Build in. We got a new Youth Build grant. It was great. You know, Youth Build's been doing a lot. I have a great team of individuals that's leading our efforts in Youth Build. It's great because I like young people. I like mentoring. Most of them look like me. And so we're trying to really provide for them. But having the flexibility of MTW, after they graduate Youth Build, they get their degree and they decide which track they want to go on, whether it's construction, you know, other trades that we have. Google's working with us with IT specialists, certified nursing assistants, you know, phlebotomists. We provide a voucher for them because we got to stabilize them because it's housing first, right? And so that's what we got to start thinking of. And then I mentioned $100,000 of development going on, but we have a pre-apprenticeship program. Well, I'm gonna rewrite my policies to ensure the people that's on my program get some of those jobs. Then we David, help them get loans to start businesses so they can run it.
Right, and you know, you had told me about that a few years ago, which just blew my mind about you all local rental subsidy. And I'm proud to say I've stole your idea. And last week, my board approved a local rental subsidy for college students matriculating through college who can't afford their housing needs. And so we've partnered with, and I'm applauding you, and I want to let you know, I mean, those are the things that really drive real change in our communities, you know, to provide the necessary services so people can move up and on. And I don't mean bootstrapping, I mean just giving a platform to even navigate. And so, you know, these are the types of things, and that's why these types of discussions are so important, because I would have never thought to do something like that without having heard you speak to it. And so I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to take an opportunity to say thank you for that innovative approach to things, because those are real engines of change in our communities.
And can I,
before you go, Miles, I just want to add, the reason we had that conversation, I remember we had it.
You remember having it. I was like, what are you doing?
We were sitting in the lobby at a conference. And so when people tell us, why are you going to conferences? Why are you traveling? That's why. So we can share ideas.
That's why I got it.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to have this platform. We're not having conferences. We're not able to communicate on a daily basis about just regular issues that's facing our agencies across the nation. So I appreciate
because I'm getting ready to put an alert thing on an app right now. You know I already took a note on that. I'm gonna steal that right now. I'm gonna let you know. And I ain't even in a hotel lobby.
Hey, it's no stealing ideas, it's sharing the wealth.
Right. Absolutely, man. Absolutely, gentlemen. Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, and so David, I just want to kind of echo some of that, man, because I'm gonna be honest with you. The people that we're serving, man, are depending on us to make the right decisions.
Absolutely.
And with all of this civil unrest, man, at the end of the day, what are we gonna do with the resources that we have? It's going to take people like us coming together, man, because everybody can't march. Somebody got to figure out a plan once our feet get tired.
Yeah.
Somebody got to come up with a plan to say, hey, these are next steps. These are realistic, tangible things that we're going to do. Our major requests, these are some things that's going to really create transformational change. And man, we got to begin to come together, discuss a strategy such as that. That's going to be universal. It may not be specific to each community, but it can be universal, man. You know, bottom line, I'm from Mississippi, I'm from the South, you guys in Illinois, but every Black family live by the same code. So at the end of the day, we can create something universal that'll be impactful to all of these families, man, because again, for me, it's not enough just having a seat at the table. We need to have a choice on the menu, you know, but we got to be the one to stimulate that conversation. We can come together and pull and show people and model to them what Black leadership looks like, what it means, because again, I remember depending on a public housing authority to provide me with housing. I remember receiving a stigma because of my address. I remember getting a certain kind of looks because I only had 2 shirts and 2 jeans that I wore to school until the school year was over. I remember what that felt like. But now that I know what it feels like, God has presented me with an opportunity like this. Will, what are you gonna do with it? Man, I'm just so grateful that we have some forward-thinking people, man. We got to come together, keep sharing those thoughts and ideas, man. And I'm gonna be honest with you. It's not just one idea, David, that you have shared with me that I'm currently using, but it's multiple. It's multiple because I just believe if we can all get on the same page, man, begin to turn this thing around, then stuff that happened to George Floyd, it won't be in vain. Stuff that happened to Trayvon, it won't be in vain. People can look at us and say, well, hey, we got somebody that looked like us in these leadership roles. At some point, change has got to come. I'm looking forward to that day.
We talked about, like, as 4 African-American men standing on this panel right now, having this discussion, you know, I mean, you know, my goal, I love all people, but I can't help that I'm African-American. And like you said, Charles, I didn't start slavery. I didn't start racism, segregation. You know, I mean, you think about it. The Fair Housing Act was in, what, 68? It was because Martin Luther King was assassinated. I was born in 73. We're not too far away from where we was already at, right? And so with this stuff going on today, you know, we serve all types of people. And I don't care who you are, what color you are, you know, what's your economic background. If it's something that I can help you provide in terms of moving to the next level, we want that. We want that hand up versus a hand out. And that mindset of either you're at the table or you're on the menu, right? I want to sit at the table. I don't care if you're R or D or Z or F. I'm gonna be at the table because the people I serve, I don't want them on the menu. They need to be
Absolutely.
Right. But I think we need to stop being unapologetic. I no longer need to make excuses about why you shouldn't hurt me. I need to no longer worry about you being comfortable. I need you to figure out how we all can be comfortable and how we all can move this thing forward. And of course, I'm a human. I care about humanity, for God's sakes. But I think we have a group of people that we're responsible for serving who don't trust a government system, who have been disenfranchised and who just don't have the same access. And I think it's going to be very, very important that we continue to make people understand that while the 4 of us may have figured some things out and gotten through some things, we have a whole lot of people left behind. And the reality of it is, you know, we take 4 victories and we think we've had change. We haven't. And that's the only point I'm attempting to make. I'm certainly, I mean, you know, the color of your skin is not what hurts, is not what's driving this for me. It's the fact that Black people, because of the color of their skin, are being disenfranchised. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, so what do you think, you know, in terms of from the policy side? And I'm not just going to keep pointing at you for policy because you're a lot more than a policy bookworm or a sense, but, you know, you have an amazing skill set, and I've seen it firsthand. And so all of us, not just us four here, well, us three here on this line, but a lot of housing authorities, has been privy to some of the policies that you help bring forward. And so, what's your thought around that, the unrest, and what may come out of Washington to help us help the people that we serve?
There's a big part of me that's a realist, and so I can look at situations, right, and we can understand what we need, but we also have to understand the systems that we are dependent on to allow, being frank, to allow the change to happen, right? And so in Washington, when you look at the leaders in Washington, like, look at yourself. You're talking about using your agencies as engines to dismantle prejudices and biases and discrimination in your local communities and help everyone to rise to the level where they should be, regardless of color, religion, et cetera, et cetera. And that's because you guys can talk about you guys understand the experience of what it means to be subjected to racism and oppression and things of that nature. And when you look at our leaders in Washington, there aren't many that have those shared experiences, and therefore there aren't many that really care about ensuring that everyone in this country has justice and equality. And so people in Washington talk a lot. Sometimes they talk a lot. Sometimes they talk a little bit about justice, about equality, and things of that nature. But nothing happens unless they're pushed. And so we have to be the ones to push, not only to push, but also to go from being a, executive director at a PHA to being someone who, at whatever the next level is in terms of influence, and the next level and the next level. And so honestly, from what I've seen, I've only been in Washington for, I don't know, maybe almost 2 years. So I'm actually from the Philadelphia area, and so I moved down here a couple of years ago to take this job with FADA. But quickly I learned about, politics, and hopefully there's no politicians watching this live, but politicians care about politics, and they care about getting elected. And so until you make either electoral changes or until you make an election dependent on someone's response to the needs of disenfranchising Black individuals in their communities, there will be very, very little change. And so I think those are the issues. So I don't have an answer for you in terms of what's going to happen. It's completely dependent on us. We talked about accountability, holding elected leaders' feet to the fire and making them do things they don't want to do. You talked about the Fair Housing Act, and that literally, yes, it came on the heels. This enactment was really unfortunately pushed across the finish line by the assassination of Dr. King. And that it shouldn't take the assassination of a leader like Dr. King for people in Washington. It shouldn't have taken that for people in Washington to understand that the right to enjoy housing free of discrimination should be extended to all Americans. And so ideally, unfortunately, we have these conversations about equal rights when things like the murder of George Floyd happen. But hopefully it will not take more and more killings and more violence for people in Washington, and also at your state houses and in the mayor's office and city council, to make the changes that we need.
So for me, I'm sorry, David, if you don't mind, I just have one quick question for everybody that's here, man. Just piggybacking off of what you just said. How do we take this energy that we have, right, from all of these things that are happening? How do we get Black folks or people living in public housing or people in America, period? Because it's not just Blacks that are marching, okay? It's more than just that. But how do we get that energy channeled to what you just stated, to the ballot boxes, to understand, to meeting and holding elected officials accountable, to having a genuine interest in policy, in laws, in regulations? How do we get our folk, how do we get people to look at that in a real way, channel that energy, put it there to some degree? Because again, a lot of this transformational change is going to have to happen at an executive level. But how do we get that energy focused there?
I have an answer.
Go for it.
We have to acknowledge the problem. We have to deal with the root cause, and we must attack it. because if we don't, we will sit here next year and have the same conversation. And yes, there are not all Black people are marching, but they marching about Black people. This is still about, we can't let that go. I won't turn it loose, y'all, because until we say, it doesn't mean I don't like white people. It just means this is not about that. This is about, we must say we got a problem and we can't keep making people feel comfortable. We have a problem with Black people. We've got to acknowledge that. I mean, that's just my thought, young man.
No, you're right.
That's just what I think. I think we keep dancing around. We keep saying, well, and if we don't use the next couple weeks to strike, it'll fall off and we'll move on to something else. We'll have another pandemic. We'll have something else that would occur because we keep losing sight of what the root issue is. The root issue is systematic racism that Black folk didn't do and can't do.
And can't fix.
And can't fix.
We
can't fix this.
We're going through a pandemic, right? And so I looked out there across the world, people marching side by side,
right?
People angry. So my thought was that, I was explaining to my son, he said, "You going to protest?" I said, well, to me, this is a war, right? Not a violent war in a sense, let's start shooting and killing, but a war in terms of systematic racism that's happened that, like you said, we didn't start. But in any war, you have infantry, you have, people sitting back, you have cooks, medics, captains, of forces, you have planners. And I said, everybody don't need to be on the front lines. Some people need to work and use their platform to make the change that they need to make. That's why I explained to them why I ran for school board years ago. I was the first African-American elected school board in that district. I did it for you and for white kids and for Latino kids, for everybody, just like everybody else. There was only 2% African-Americans there. When I found out that I was the first elected, I'm like, what? In 2015, I was the first? That's unheard of, right? And so we have to continually take the lead in efforts, but we have to train up, right? And that's why I'm happy we have Youth Build, and I spend a lot of time with them and explaining it to them that, you can, like you said, Miles, look at me now, you think I came from something. I didn't come from anything. I worked hard to get where I am. I overcame obstacles to get here. And so I have to use the platform, and I explain to them, you can't mess it up. So I'm gonna teach them how to dress, how to act, how to work. But I need to teach them that it's important that they understand who they are and fight for their rights, period, all the time.
Right.
Yep. And I guess going back to also identifying the problem, because I definitely agree with that. So as for us, and I'm assuming when we saying identifying the issue, we're speaking about, I guess, white America or people in leadership, because I'm pretty sure a lot of the African-American people, we've already identified the problem where we understand specifically what the issues are and that type deal. So again, what is it going to look like after this? How do we are here, we represent a lot of folk, and we are identifying it. Where do we go from here?
I think we got to keep the pulse of the conversation. That one, affordable housing matters, and and we can use this platform to help create change. Like I said before, dismantling some of the systemic racism. We know that the election process is set up a certain way. The criminal justice process is set up a certain way for certain individuals to win. And it's sad when you look at the incarceration rates. When you look at when you go to a suburban school in white America and you go to a minority school in urban America, the difference, the quality of books, the quality of computers, the quality of materials, the number of people at the football game supporting their community's kids. In the white community, they shut down a whole town sometimes when it's a high school football game on a Friday. I remember playing and it would be nobody there because I couldn't shoot a jump shot or slam dunk a basketball. Right, but it's about the support of the community. So I think we got to continually support one another in our efforts, but also help bring and understand community support makes the difference. Because me being on that school board, me being in PTA, me DJing on Friday night out at the kids' schools, they when they grow up, they're gonna see that my dad was there, right? And now make sure we teach our young men that you're leaders in the community. You're not taking away from the women, not taking away from the women, but part of racism was they destroyed the households by taking the African-American men out, period. You know.
One of the other things I'll say is don't underestimate the importance of investing in, and you guys aren't, but I just want to highlight the importance of investing in the people that you serve, the families and the residents, because when you talk about creating a movement and creating change and getting, William asked about getting younger people or just, people involved and interested in policy and law and things of that nature, and explain to them, this is why public housing, for instance, looks the way it is. This is why it's so difficult to build affordable housing in our community. Yes. Or this is why it's located in a certain area. Or this is why it's in the condition that it's in. And these are nothing has happened by accident. The reason that there are generations of families stuck in poverty isn't because they just got they were unlucky. It's because, like we talked about, the forces in the systems that oppress marginalized people, Black people in this country, all kinds of minorities in this country. And so ensuring that the residents that you have, the folks that you serve, are informed, are educated, and that for you as a leader, their voice matters, and that they can get change happening at their agency because they come to you and they come to your staff, they have a plan, and you might have to walk them through that. I think that sometimes there's a tension between PHA leadership and residents in terms of what their goals are, and the residents understanding the resources and the rules that leadership has to follow, but coming together by having a meeting of the mind, so to speak, and empowering those folks to really instigate change on a small level, and then growing that into a real engine of change at a larger level is one thing I think that PHA leaders can do.
Well, we're nearing the end. Any last words that you guys have? We have about 3 minutes. I want to make sure that I respect your time. I know you guys are all busy in terms of what you do in life and then your own personal health and family. So we have a couple minutes left. Any last ending words?
I just want to close on some of the things that I think it does look like. I think it looks like flagging inappropriate, addressing things, acknowledging the problem that we have. But to all of you all's point, we must come together. We must develop policies with everyone that help prevent this type of behavior. And we must, as the gentleman just said, we must put things in place to continue to provide our residents with services and needs to help elevate them. It wasn't deliberate, it was deliberate that it happened. We have to be deliberate about it being solved. It didn't happen by accident. We want to think it's just going, just say be nice to people and things are going to get better. No, we have to be deliberate. We got to call it when we see it. And that's how I think we move on. And I also think that's how we heal as a nation.
Very good. Next.
I just believe that to your point, I definitely agree 1,000%. I think this is the time now where leaders lead. And we as Black leaders, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to the residents we serve and the community that we're in. And so we shouldn't take this moment for granted. We can turn this tragedy into an opportunity. And I think that's how we need to be looking at this thing, because again, the decisions that we make today is going to impact on where we go tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
If I had to say anything in closing, just to, as since we're talking here, and I know that other folks are tuned in, but don't neglect yourselves. Don't neglect your own health.
Right.
Don't neglect well-being as a leader. You can only go so far. Yep. So make sure you're taking care of yourselves, recharging, and whatever it is that keeps you going. Filling that tank.
Thank you. You're right.
Right on top.
Yeah.
I want to thank you guys for taking your time and sharing your wisdom. I know how smart you are. I know the creative things you do. I learned from each one of you guys. Building a better Champaign County came from building a better Albany, right? So we all borrow, steal the way.
Absolutely.
But again, every couple of weeks we plan on having a platform of individuals. So tune in maybe the next couple of weeks. Our goal is to have developers. We want to talk to developers for low-income housing tax credit developers from across the nation, also to see how COVID, along with the unrest right now, civil unrest, hopefully it's all over by then. But we still need to keep that conversation going, whether people march or not. how it's affecting them. So again, this segment was focused on COVID-19 and affordable housing, along with the civil unrest. And this is the balcony and the dance floor. Thank you guys. You guys have a great weekend and be safe. Appreciate it.
All right, you do the same. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.